This past weekend, the members of Mariachi Nuevo Royal were asked to play a bit of an unusual midday gig south of Hebronville. The first activity of the day was for the group to meet up at Los Catorces, which is a crossroads overpass located equidistantly 14 miles between Fremont, Alice, and Kingsville. Basically the intersection of Texas FM 141 and US Highway 281. This is not an unusual meeting place for South Texas mariachi players, and even more so to our group since Mariachi Nuevo Royal has members from Fremont, Kingsville, and Alice. Maybe because it is October or because we were there, an old folktale came to mind. This is a story of the alleged ghost of a woman dressed in black who is said to exist at that location. This story was told to me many years ago back in the 1970s and repeated on many a school bus trip on dark nights in the 1980s and 1990s. I was delighted to have read these stories, albeit more detailed, in a 3-volume work called Stories That Must Not Die by one-time Texas A&I Professor Juan Sauvageau. I always found local stories fascinating since many people tend to count out or downplay the events and folklore of South Texas. I like these stories and the books, mostly because they were set in places like San Diego, Falfurrias, La Chona, and Los Catorces. The latter of which truly can be described as basically 14 miles in the middle of nowhere. The story opens with a bit of a framing device. A lady wearing black clothes comes into being at Los Catorces. This apparition happened sometime in the early to mid-1970s. 4 men, oil company workers, on the way to work at the Los Borregos Exxon refinery on the King Ranch claimed to have seen the woman. It should be pointed out that there was no overpass at that site in those days, only a blinking light signal. US 281 was a narrow, almost winding road that sort of paralleled a railroad. I only remember it as it was before from my earliest memories. It sort of had the appearance of one of the same such signals west of La Chona on FM 716, where the road from Benavides intersects FM 716 before you get to Rielitos. The men were horrified as they say she appeared in their path. Much like people who have hit a deer, that feeling of helplessness that comes knowing you can avoid the impact. However, there was no impact. No crash, no thump. They stopped the work truck to inspect the vehicle and called the sheriff. Searches revealed nothing. No body, no vehicular damage. Only the tire tracks on the road. Now, when I first heard this story, I imagined that the origin of the lady in black to be from the late 1800s. As I studied to be an historian, I began to change this assessment. San Diego, Texas, which I had always thought was the location of the story. I was told it was one of the oldest places in South Texas, but it could not have been the place. The Handbook of Texas indicates that around 1800 San Diego de Arriba and San Diego del Bajo, 2 grants totaling 8 leagues of land, were granted by the Spanish government to Julian Flores and his son, Ventura. The grants were surveyed in 1806 by Jose Faustino Contreras, the Surveyor General of San Luis Potosí. Julian and Ventura Flores arrived in 1809 and received their deed in 1812. There just doesn't seem to have been enough time for established ranches and a township to develop that would have allowed that to be the location. Professor Juan Sauvageau's book added the missing information, albeit ambiguously, as having happened in the Rio Grande Valley, which was still the old Spanish province of Nuevo Santander. He even provides a name to the protagonist, Don Raul Ramos, a rich haciendero, and his wife, Doña Leonora Rodriguez de Ramos. Now, this places the story much farther back. As we all know, the Mexican War for Independence did not begin until 1810 and did not conclude until 1821. Thus, this story, being from colonial times, would have to be prior to 1821. But back to the story. Doña Leonora was said to be one of the most beautiful girls in all of New Spain. They married, but had not been married long before Don Raul was recalled to Spain to attend business matters. He was gone for about 6 months, including the sea voyages to and fro. Since even regular life was difficult in those days, he chose not to make his wife make the journey and left her at their hacienda. When he came back, he was overjoyed at first to discover that his wife was 6 months pregnant. As is the case with most busybodies and jealous neighbors, Don Raul was told his wife had been adulterous while he was away. Enraged, he came to the erroneous conclusion the child would be illegitimate, a bastard, in that those were violent times and that the sin of rage is an ungovernable passion. Don Raul orchestrated a plan. He would have his 2 most loyal servants take Doña Leonora, who would have no knowledge of the occurrences or even the circumstances, in a carriage a full day's ride north from the Rio Bravo while he rode in the opposite direction to ensure that any change of heart would be in vain. The servants were to hang her from a tree at sunset. The version of the story I heard was that Don Raul, upon riding a bit, encountered a peasant who he knew well and favored. I always imagined this person to be some sort of curandero or shaman. The peasant congratulated Don Raul on his soon-to-be new child. Don Raul explained that his wife, a strumpet and harlot, imagine the appropriate Spanish terms here, would soon pay for her infidelity. The peasant, somewhat taken aback, informed him that his hatred had blinded him to his love and that a great injustice would take place that day unless he rode after them and stopped. Suddenly, Don Raul's heart was softened and he rode his horse to the point of death, only reaching the site of the hanging to see Doña Leonora swinging from the tree. He let out a yell and fell to his knees crying. He would be cursed with this his whole life. Doña Leonora, having died not even aware of why she had been hanged, is doomed to wander the location, lost and distraught in confusion as the night breeze seeks out justice for her. That location is said to be Los Catorces. On occasions, when I have waited for other mariachis before or after gigs, at night I have often wondered what I would do if I saw her. Honestly, I have often wondered if I could help her out of her torment. I would tell her this story. Maybe it would end the haunting. Maybe she'd rip out my throat. Who knows? How sad it is that most times in life injustice sometimes seems to win. There are people who say that these stories are merely designed to scare children, to prevent the intrigues of would-be lovers on one-time backroads of South Texas. Truth be told, if you have driven from San Antonio to the Rio Grande Valley via US 281, you have already been there. I guess we will never know. Well, maybe one of us will know on some late October night when we wait at Los Catorces.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and feel free to watch more of our videos. We always look forward to receiving your stories of the strange and unexplained. If you would like to share a story or two, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Reddit, or our email. Thank you.